Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. I am so thrilled to have you here today because we're looking at one of the most fascinating, incredibly high-stakes industrial transformations happening anywhere in the world right now. We're breaking down the strategic diagnostic for the Bangladesh ready-made garment sector, or RMG for short, and their massive impending transition coming up in the year 2026. Now, if you follow global supply chains, manufacturing, or just international economics in general, you already know Bangladesh is an absolute powerhouse. But the rules of the game are about to change entirely. And the blueprint for how they plan to survive, adapt, and really dominate is nothing short of brilliant.
To truly understand the gravity of this whole diagnostic, we've got to anchor everything on one incredibly stark number: 84%. The ready-made garment sector generates an astonishing 84% of Bangladesh's total national export earnings. Let that sink in for a second. 84%. It also directly contributes 11% to the entire national GDP. So we aren't just talking about a single sector of the economy here. For Bangladesh, this sector effectively is the definitive engine of their macroeconomic stability. The stakes for this 2026 transition literally could not be higher.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our agenda for the audit today. We'll cover the 2026 triple transition, our internal diagnostic of the sector's capabilities, the external horizon of volatile markets, the 2026 math problem, and finally, their strategic three-phase survival roadmap.
Starting right off with Section 1, the 2026 triple transition.
So, the industry is facing this incredibly narrow window for evolution, and it's being dictated by three major intersecting forces. First up, the economic side. In 2026, Bangladesh faces LDC graduation, meaning they're going to graduate from least developed country status. Now that's a huge milestone, absolutely, but it means they'll lose crucial duty-free access to Western markets, all while battling global inflation. Second, you have political forces. Geopolitical conflicts are actively disrupting major freight routes. Think about the Suez Canal rerouting. That adds massive time and cost. And third, the environmental aspect. Tightening global carbon tracking and incredibly strict EU sustainability mandates are becoming the absolute baseline just to even play the game. All three of these forces collide perfectly in 2026.
Moving on to Section 2, our internal diagnostic of the sector's capabilities.
This sector is defended by what is essentially an incredible 10-pillar internal moat. We're talking green factory leadership, a self-reliant knit sector, and a really tight local supply chain. You add to that a highly resilient workforce, pure economic dominance, a traceable supply chain, circular economy practices, an unmatched global reputation for sheer scale, transparent social reforms, and the massive demographic strength of a 4 million-strong workforce. But, two specific pillars really stand out here. First, their absolute global dominance in LEED-certified facilities makes them the undisputed green factory leaders. Second, the knitwear sector is 80 to 90% self-reliant. They produce the vast majority of their yarn and fabric locally. That backyard linkage is a structural insulation against global supply shocks that the regional competitors just do not have.
But we have to look at the flip side and contrast those amazing strengths with 10 critical bottlenecks. The financial friction is very real right now. They're facing a severe banking liquidity crisis, high financing costs, and a massive sustainability funding gap for smaller factories. Operationally, they're battling energy dependency, product concentration, deep cotton reliance, a real lack of original design, production interruptions, logistical vulnerabilities, and they're lagging in automation. The crucial takeaway here is twofold. The most immediate chokehold is that domestic banking liquidity crisis. It is paralyzing operational capital and the ability to open letters of credit. Compounding this is their heavy reliance on highly competitive, low-margin cotton basics rather than pushing into higher-value synthetics.
That brings us to Section 3, scanning the external horizon and those volatile markets.
Looking outward, there are 10 distinct levers they can pull for massive value creation. They can capture overflow with the China Plus One strategy, execute an aggressive expansion into MMF, which stands for man-made fibers, and really embrace digitalization. They can also secure GSP Plus status, rapidly drive solar integration, transition to high-value products, pioneer design studio development, build up a textile recycling hub, aggressively pursue bilateral trade deals, and heavily monetize their sustainability branding. The biggest levers by far? Pivoting toward those high-growth man-made fibers like athleisure and officially monetizing Brand Bangladesh as a premium eco-hub through solar and textile recycling.
Now, navigating that horizon means dodging 10 major threats. The immediate dangers, that LDC graduation price impact, geopolitical conflicts, fierce regional competition, and global inflation diminishing overall demand. Then you've got the structural threats, policy uncertainty, stricter global regulations, rising global energy prices, shipping delays forcing unfavorable contracts, high interest rates, and continuous compliance pressure. But what's really keeping executives up at night? For sure, it's the painful loss of LDC status, which inherently carries a 10 to 12% price increase risk, combined with those geopolitical supply chain disruptions that are just violently spiking freight costs. Let's look at Section 4, the 2016 math problem.
Now, what's really interesting about this mathematical equation is that it literally dictates the entire industry's survival. On the left side of the scale, you have the inevitable deficit. Losing duty-free access post-LDC graduation equals an automatic 10 to 12% price hike, period. So to balance that scale and actually remain globally competitive, that exact margin has to be aggressively manufactured on the right side. How? Well, through a green reputation premium, shifting to high-margin man-made fibers, finding 2% digitalization fabric savings, and cutting energy operating expenses by 20 to 30% with massive solar integration. But remember, the core dependency holding this entire mathematical equation together is solving the domestic banking liquidity crisis. You simply cannot fund this green efficiency transformation without operational capital.
And finally, Section 5, the strategic three-phase survival roadmap.
So how do they actually pull this off? The roadmap breaks down chronologically into 3 phases. Phase 1, the next 0 to 3 years, is purely about stabilization and survival. Phase 2, the 3 to 6 year mark, forces structural diversification. And Phase 3, the 6 to 10 year endgame, is all about establishing global value leadership. Let's walk through them.
Phase 1 is your immediate triage. Priority number 1 right now in the 0 to 3 year window has to be banking and LC resolution. Institutional intervention is urgently required to prioritize opening letters of credit specifically for RMG raw materials. Because we have to remember, operational capital is the core dependency here. You have to stop the margin bleeding and stabilize operations before you can upgrade the factory, right? Alongside this, factories need immediate, low-cost operational energy audits to eliminate steam leaks and waste without requiring some massive upfront capital investment. Then we move to Phase 2, the 3 to 6 year horizon, and this is where the structural shift really happens. The industry has to implement targeted incentives to aggressively force a pivot away from basic volume cotton and into high-margin man-made fibers and technical wear. Simultaneously, this phase requires massive industry-wide installation of rooftop solar. Why? Because that directly forces the 20 to 30% reduction in operating expenses that they absolutely need to offset the rising labor costs of a post-LDC world.
And finally, Phase 3, that 6 to 10 year endgame. This is where Bangladesh transcends simply surviving the transition and truly establishes global dominance. The roadmap mandates scaling jute, which is local textile waste, into a massive recycling infrastructure that makes Bangladesh the undeniable global circularity hub. Crucially, they also must incentivize native, in-house design studios. That officially transitions the sector from being heavily reliant contract manufacturers taking external orders into highly profitable original design manufacturers.
And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate paradigm shift required. On one side, you have the pre-2026 baseline, volume-based, cotton-reliant, locked into low-margin price competition, entirely dependent on duty-free access, and acting strictly as contract manufacturers. On the other side, you have the post-2026 vision of brand Bangladesh, value-driven, dominant in man-made fibers, commanding an eco-premium price, acting as a global circular jute hub, and leading as original design manufacturers. It is an absolute evolutionary leap.
We've seen the strengths, we've walked through the roadmap, and we've looked at the incredible post-2026 vision. But it all rests entirely on the fulcrum of today's financial reality. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to ponder. The strategy itself is flawless, but can the industry solve its immediate banking liquidity crisis fast enough to actually fund this critical 2026 transformation? The clock is ticking and the whole world is watching to see if brand Bangladesh can pull off the industrial evolution of the decade. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope it gave you a phenomenal structural understanding of what's happening right now. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.